And a lot of focus has gone into memory-driven architectures and multi-model systems to handle more sophisticated tasks and workflows. Applied AI research has progressed to better analyze and generate data, text, and images, which enable personalized services, better decision-making, leveraging evidence, and more intelligent automation and efficiency. An example of this would be CGI's digital triplets, which allow end users through natural language to interrogate data from performance data down to assets and molecular level data, which really is moving the mark on how we can leverage data to make decisions. Canada has a lot to be proud of in the areas of fundamental and applied AI research. Mila's Yoshua Bengio and Canada's CFAR AI chair, Donya Presup, authored the first GFlow-NETs paper and approach for drug molecule discovery. Canada's Triumph and Perimeter Institute's quantum-assisted AI model combined deep learning with quantum computing to simulate particle collisions for CERN's Large Hadron Collider. And Amy's Richard Sutton won the 2024 Turing Award with Andrew Barto for conceptual and algorithmic foundations of reinforcement learning. At the same time of these successes, the path from research to commercialization needs strengthening. By focusing investment in high-value sectors and closing the gaps on the global AI ecosystem, Canada can move to lead in translating research into real-world impact. Research institutions face slow, rigid funding, limited data access, policy barriers to collaboration, and intense competition for talent. Canada must shift our culture from risk aversion to responsible innovation. Building public trust requires AI literacy, equitable access to tools, greater transparency in data use and protection, and an innovation culture grounded in security, fairness, sustainability, and reliability. Current funding models are slow, misaligned, unclear, making it difficult to scale promising ideas from research through to commercialization. Canada needs to invest in high-potential innovations beyond early research, strengthen collaboration between academia, government, and industry to accelerate the development and create more opportunities for talent downstream. It's also important to ensure that our work permits, permanent residency pathways, student visa policies are aligned to attract and retain high-quality talent. Your next question was on the role of the federal government. The federal government must play a central role in reducing risk aversion and building public trust, enabling adoption, as well as smooth pathways to success. To keep Canada research competitive and ethical, clear governance is needed that aligns with Canadian culture and is supported by AI literacy. Federal oversight, strategic investments, and supportive policies are vital to drive innovation and build trust in responsible AI. The federal government should also clarify the definition of sovereignty. We need to clearly define what it is we must absolutely protect, such as data, intellectual property, and our talent. What we're willing to give up if we collaborate, and for what benefit to Canada, and who we're willing to collaborate in which sector, which shares our culture and our ethical standards. Looking ahead, maximizing the value of innovation requires mechanisms to bridge research to market, ensure public benefit from data assets and investments, and protect our intellectual property, providing clear opportunities downstream for our talent in either academics, industry, or the public sector. The areas we need to focus, diffusion and sharing, requires stronger collaboration between academic, industry, and public sector. Commercialization and valorization, where industry investment is key to growth, but Canada must ensure that its IP and talent stay local as well as protect our data. The practical application of innovations will help streamline the transition from research to commercialization and can help solve real-world problems and marketable problems faster. Your final question was on protection of public assets. Public-private partnerships are critical.
And if you can please wind up in the next 10, 15 seconds.
Yes. Are critical. We need clear benefit sharing rules to protect Canadian assets while attracting industry investment in Canada. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we will proceed to our second witness, Ms. Adam. Ms. Adam, please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Good morning, Chair and honorable members of the committee, and thank you for the invitation to appear today. It's a privilege to contribute to this important study on the future of artificial intelligence in Canada. As mentioned, my name is Angela Adam, and I serve as Senior VP at eStructure Data Centers. We're the largest Canadian-owned and operated data center platform Our facilities host some of the country's most critical digital workloads, from financial institutions, telecom providers, AI research institutes, and hundreds of Canadian organizations that rely on secure, resilient, and sustainable infrastructure to operate and innovate every day. My comments today will focus on one central idea, as this is my area of expertise, digital infrastructure. Canada cannot lead in AI research, commercializations, or responsible deployment unless our research institutes and universities have priority access to sovereign, high-performance, and scalable digital infrastructure built and controlled here in Canada. This is a missing piece in our national AI architecture, and it is the foundation upon which every other ambition in this space must rest. AI has advanced faster than any other previous technology cycle. Models that require modest computing power only a few years ago now demand clusters measured in tens, sometimes hundreds of megawatts. Research teams across Canada, from Mila and Vector and universities, all say the same things. They cannot access enough high-performance compute to train and refine cutting-edge models in Canada. We know this because some of them are our own customers. And the results are predictable. Our best research is increasingly rely on foreign infrastructure. Promising research is delayed, fragmented, simply cannot be attempted. And opportunities for commercializations drift southward or overseas. Canada has extraordinary talent, but without sovereign compute and digital infrastructure, talent cannot translate into scalable innovation. Sovereign digital infrastructure means three things: control. Canadian entities govern physical infrastructure, data flows, supply chain, security protocols, proximity. Researchers access high-performance compute without latency or export restrictions, and scalability, infrastructure that grows with demand, not behind it. At eStructure, we see firsthand how quickly this requirement is accelerating. We operate 14 facilities across the country, with 2 others set to come online in fall 2026, which will be some of the largest AI-ready data centers in Canada. We're already working with leading researchers, private sectors, innovators, and government stakeholders who need secure and high-density environments that are sustainable and built in a way that they can trust. Building this capability is entirely feasible in Canada. We have the power, the land, the engineering talent, and the climate advantages that other countries would envy. What we require is strategic alignment and predictable policy. One of the most important considerations for the committee is that research institutes cannot compete with global cloud providers for capacity. When a global AI company wants 50 or 100 megawatts of power for their workloads, they can move markets instantly. Universities cannot, neither can our research institutes. If we want Canadian research to stay competitive, we need to reserve a portion of sovereign AI-ready capacity for research, universities, and public institutes, ensure that this capacity is built on Canadian soil and governed under Canadian jurisdiction, make it affordable and predictable over time, and design procurement and partnerships models that favor long-term national outcomes over short-term transactional decisions. The alternative is simple. Canada will continue to produce world-class ideas that must be built, trained, and commercialized elsewhere. Data centers are the backbone of responsible, scalable AI, and Canada is well positioned to lead. A responsible AI ecosystem requires responsible physical infrastructure. As I said, in Canada, we have abundant power, and a significant amount is clean and carbon neutral. We have strong privacy laws and an industry that is already regulated to the highest global standards of physical and cybersecurity. A sovereign data center footprint would enable secure model training and storage under Canadian jurisdiction, controlled access for sensitive research, defense use case, public sector AI, an infrastructure that can grow rapidly without compromising reliability. This is precisely the model that other nations, including the US, UK, France, Japan, are now scaling at speed, and Canada must do the same. In closing, we must forge a pathway forward through partnership, clarity, and national coordination. The federal government has a critical role in setting direction, reducing fragmentation, and ensuring that digital infrastructure investments align with Canada's long-term interest. 3 immediate opportunities stand out: create a coordinated national strategy for sovereign digital infrastructure with clear targets, timelines, and governance. Establish a dedicated, protected capacity for research institutes, enabling them to compete globally. Partner with Canadian-owned data center operators, cloud providers, system integrators who can deliver this infrastructure quickly, at scale, and within our national regulatory and security frameworks. We've already made this proposal to the Major Projects Office. This approach does not compete with private innovation, it accelerates it.
If you can please
Canada,
wind up in the next few
Canada
seconds.
built one of the strongest AI research communities in the world. We now need to give that community the infrastructure required to continue leading. If we fail to invest in sovereign, scalable, AI-ready digital infrastructure, we risk losing the next decade of innovation, not because of talent or ideas, but simply because of infrastructure. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today.
Thank you to both our witnesses for their opening remarks. Now we will start our first round of questioning, and we will begin with MP Baldinelli for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone, and it's a pleasure to have you, and thank you to the witnesses for being here this morning. To Ms. Goutou, I mean, in your comments, you had talked about 30 years of experience, AI research, deep roots in Canada. It almost goes similar to what we've learned in previous studies. I mean, we're funding the research, we have the talent in Canada, yet it's that supporting the ecosystem, the Canadian ecosystem to grow and flourish. And so we have some concerns in that area, and work needs to be done in that area. Ms. Adams, you had talked to that as well. Specifically, that notion of sovereign. Ms. Adams, you talked about 14 facilities that you have in Canada. Congratulations on that. That's a Canadian success story as we get into this field. In December 2024, the federal government announced it was giving Cohere $240 million as part of the Canadian Sovereign AI Compute Strategy. They, in fact, signed an MOU with them this August. So what was your reaction when you found out one of Cohere's strategic partners benefiting from Canadian taxpayers was an American company and not Canadian?
Right. Well, thank you for the question. Obviously, that could have been executed, that the MOU could have been executed with a data center and compute provider from Canada, but it wasn't the case. I think perhaps the government has learned from that and will continue to refine their approach and look at what it is available in Canada in terms of both digital infrastructure and system integration perspective. And when they do make this decision in support of AI development research, we'll look at the ecosystem as a whole and pick Canadian players that can bring more value to our nation.
Yeah, I mean, particularly when you look at it, I mean, and we're talking about a Canadian sovereign AI compute strategy, and yet, you know, the $240 million was granted to Cohere. Their first action or move was to then hire an American company, I believe it's called CoWeave, to work with it. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I mean, again, if we're using Canadian sovereign strategy and fund, you would think that they would look to companies like eStructure, which has 14 facilities in Canada. So has eStructure received any funds from the Canadian sovereign AI compute strategy? If so, how much?
No, not to date.
So have you been consulted by the federal government in the development of the AI policy?
We have been consulted on several occasions. We've had the opportunity to sit down with ISED and Minister Solomon, with Mark Sean as well. I can't really say how much of our feedback and expertise has been included in developing the A strategy, but we have had the chance to come to the table, yes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Goutou, we had talked earlier before the hearing just started, and you're a member of the task force, and thank you for your participation in that. And when you look at the information that's posted online, I believe 11,000 people had submitted briefs to the government or taken part in the consultation program. 11,000, I mean, when you look at a population of 41 million people, do you think it's just an issue of Canadians not knowing that much about AI? Why the slow response, especially when the government talks about creating, this task force, and it's talking about sprinting to create a strategy, and yet only 11,000 people had responded. So is it a literacy issue?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yes, I believe that AI literacy is critical. It's not just a misunderstanding in what AI is, it's also a misunderstanding of what it is not. I believe that this was one of the highest public consultation responses, which goes to speak to Canadians feeding into the request for public consultations. However, I do think that we need to increase our AI literacy so that we have better trust and comfort in what the tools are able to do, and we level set that this is a tool, and it is a tool that is designed to assist us, and having more of a voice in how in our daily life, in our work lives, it's able to assist us as Canadians, I think is really critical.
Now, quickly, you had talked about, again, I mean, when we look at our previous studies, we're great at funding, we're great at the talent here in the country. It's at that ecosystem to bring it to the next step on the commercialization aspect. Like, for example, ChatGPT, OpenAI. I mean, it's like the private sector in the United States is moving forward in creating these systems and processes in place. So how is that we can facilitate that here in Canada without always having to rely on the government to do it?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. Thank you very much. So, Madam Chair, I would like to suggest that this is exactly why we need collaboration between academic, private sector, and public sector to be able to advance it. Canada has a lot of thought leadership that has initiated a lot of the technology and the foundation for the technologies that these private sector hyperscaler organizations are advancing. And I think we're at the cusp of an excellent opportunity. I don't think that being thoughtful in how we move forward has really set us behind. There are still a number of gaps in the AI ecosystem where Canada can thrive and become an absolute leader in everything from green AI, sustainable models, quantum computing, as well as really focusing on some niche or more...
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up
sorry.
for MP Baldinelli, and we will now proceed to MP Jessic for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to both our witnesses for coming here today. Dr. Guthieu, I recently visited Amy in Edmonton, and the presentation was done that we moved from researcher to learn about their individual initiative. I was somewhat struck that there doesn't seem to be any coordination amongst the various researchers in terms of bigger questions that needed to be answered that perhaps were priorities for Canada. Just as an example, there was a demonstration of an ultrasound wand that could be used in remote communities, not by physicians necessarily, but by nurses, allied health professionals, avoiding potentially transfer to a southern medical center and therefore saving, obviously, some money. How do you see, what is the coordination that's going on across Canada between all these individual researchers, and how do you see that best being brought together? What role could the federal government play in that?
Thank you for your question. Curiosity-based research remains a critical area. I believe that organizations like Amy, Mila, the Vector Institute, and others foster the ability to bring these new innovations, and we need to have that curiosity-based research. Where we seem to have a gap is taking that individual research and then progressing it to tangible, practical. And that example you have is an excellent example of how there is a need and a problem that can be solved with research. As we continue to incubate these solutions that come from research, we need to focus on what's the problem we're trying to solve. How can we then bring the best of the industry thought leaders across Canada from the data infrastructure, from the AI compute capacity, as well as creating tangible solutions that have a benefit to society as well as are marketable. By bringing together clusters of industry thought leaders to be able to move these along, streamlining a lot of our great funding programs that are hard to access, hard to understand, are unclear to researchers, to startups, and streamlining, having a single pane of glass view to how can I take this idea quickly while it is still an innovation and move it to something that's a tangible benefit. I believe by having groups of sectors together, health, social sciences, manufacturing, robotics, oil and gas, energy, critical minerals, we'd be able to bring thought leaders across a spectrum that can take these curiosity-based research and move them forward, progress them into something that will benefit us in society as well as a revenue-generating marketable solution.
As a physician, I know that you have particular expertise in the medical information sector. Could you just detail for us some of the most promising applications that you see for the use of AI to assist the medical and health professionals?
Thank you for your question. Health has been leveraging machine learning, AI, and data for decades, my entire career. Everything from public health solutions, looking at how we can use data, not just to inform what may happen in the future in disease progression, in addiction, in opioid crisis, but being able to look at the data to see how can we get ahead of that? How can I make a change early in a cycle of addiction or homelessness so that somebody can have a better life and we can target the problem and be able to provide a solution sooner. Other areas where we really have moved the dial with artificial intelligence would be in diagnostic imaging. You know, artificial intelligence is a fantastic tool to see things that are very hard to see with the human eye. We're already working with Helsinki University Hospital and others on being able to detect early brain bleeds that are almost always fatal if not caught early. Being able to reduce the screening ages for cancers because we can see minute changes earlier. And as I mentioned, things like digital triplets where I can have a conversation with a large amount of data that's very hard, complex, expensive to be able to pull together. I now have the ability to be able to bring that information together with agentic AI, multimodal AI, and have a conversation with data to make better decisions and connect the dots and patterns.
How much time do I have?
1 minute, 20 seconds.
Okay. Again, Dr. Gutu, to you. You mentioned public trust. Recent reports have said that CRA, as an example, obviously a federal responsibility, that a number of the pieces of advice that have been given have actually been incorrect through the current system of call centers and so on. And CRA is looking to introduce AI. Isn't there a bit of a problem of garbage in ending up as garbage out in the introduction of AI? And how would you see the best way of avoiding that issue?
You know, the advancements in research and where we've been focused on is increasing the reliability. So by taking the AI tools you see now and rather as a search engine, use it as a service, how can we focus it on knowledge retention, getting access to information very quickly, and using agentic models to test the quality of the answers before they're received? We're at a perfect time in our history where we have 25–40% of the population will be retiring in the next 10 years. These tools are a fantastic way of maintaining that knowledge and being able to serve us in service delivery so that the call center people will have access to all of that knowledge that is retiring and be able to get very quick answers to questions. But you're absolutely right. More research, more investment into quality solutions, reliability, transparency is going to help solve that over time so it becomes more reliable.
Thank you. Time is up, and we will now proceed to MP Blanchet-Jonca for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je salue les témoins qui sont avec nous
Thank
aujourd'hui.
you, Chair. Greetings to the witnesses who have come here for the new study. Madam Guti, Quebec is well known for AI, and you mentioned this, and that it has a wide public, private, and industrial AI network, but public institutions are lagging behind in adoption. What's the problem? Is it a lack of leadership? Here, we have the network that's very wide in Quebec, but adoption is very limited.
The question is related to the ability for the public sector to move forward quickly. You know, this is where we really need to move from a public sector culture of risk aversion. A lot of the limitation comes from the need to go through the rigor that we have. Public sector has an unprecedented responsibility to our citizens and to protect our data, to ensure that our infrastructures and our technology is supporting that protection. However, By being risk adverse, we are slowing down the ability to have the efficiencies and leverage the tools, adopt the tools in a way that they're providing meaningful efficiencies and changes. This is where I believe the AI strategy refresh will be able to provide better guidance so that we're able to move the dial forward and advance and take advantage of what the private sector is seeing as a huge efficiency gaining technology. As well, I know that there is a lot of pockets of public sector where there are different innovations, pilots, proofs of concepts underway, and we've seen through our own studies that the ability to move those into production has been slow. We need the infrastructure. We need the guidance and the guardrails to be able to use these technologies and move them forward. And this is a perfect role for the federal government to provide that guidance that will let the provincial governments and the different ministries know how they can use these technologies safely to get the same gains as the private sector.
Merci, Mme Gauthier. Je vais poursuivre pour ma deuxième question. À CGI, vous travaillez sur
Thank you. You're working on the real integration of AI in operations, not only in research. From your point of view, is Canada investing a lot in university research but not enough in industrial integration, experimental development, and assisting companies, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises?
So, Madam Chair, the question is related to are we investing more in research and not so much in industry and business being able to use this technology? I believe we have a good investment and a plan for investment so that we have a more fair spread across industry. But the collaboration between public sector, private sector, and academic is critical. It'd be short-sighted not to be able to work together to be able to advance and accelerate ourselves as leaders. So having a more even and more aligned investment strategy. For example, public sector, the supercluster funding is not available to them. In private sector, there's a number of funding that is available that is, again, very slow to move and unclear how to get access to. Conversations I had during the task force with small and medium businesses indicated that sometimes they were stumbling across funding opportunities rather than having a clear path. So aligning and streamlining access to funding based on marketable solutions that are going to advance us, public, private sector, to make Canada a real leader in this area is absolutely critical.
Merci pour votre réponse assez complète.
Thank you for your very comprehensive answer. Now, intellectual property. Most of the research funded by the federal government produces intellectual property that very often is bought over by foreign actors, unfortunately. From your point of view, what should the federal government do to make sure that intellectual property generated in Quebec or Canada remains here and it's not captured by other countries or multinationals?
So the question related to intellectual property goes hand in hand with my statement on a need to clearly define what we mean by sovereignty. We need, Canada is not a large country. We need to be able to collaborate to accelerate. However, we need to do it thoughtfully, and we need to define, first of all, what we will absolutely protect, what remains in Canada and will not be shared. Intellectual property is on that list. Ideation and our investments in research through to marketable solutions need to be protected. So when we are working and collaborating with partners, we need to decide who we are willing to collaborate with and who makes the most sense. And as we're working on these collaborative opportunities, we need to make it very clear that Canada will retain our intellectual property as well as have opportunities for talent that we're bringing into the country, as well as our own talent of Canadians, making sure that it's a place that you want to work. Canada is a very attractive place. People want to come here in their research capacity, and they want to stay, and we're limiting the ability to stay through our permanent residency and other opportunities or time-limited work permits. So all of these, our intellectual property is not just the tool, it's also the people.
Madame Gauthier, vous travaillez avec des clients publics, privés, gouvernementaux. Selon vous, est-ce que le Canada dépend
trop? You work with many public and private sector workers. Do you think that we depend a lot on foreign multinationals like Google, Amazon, and so on? Do you think this undermines the security of our data?
Related to our partnering with organizations that are not Canadian, such as Google and Microsoft and others. Again, I don't think it's practical, and it may be short-sighted to think that we can immediately 100% advance ourselves without having partnerships and collaboration with organizations that have advanced it. However, again, we need to define what it is we're going to protect. We need to ensure, if we are working with Google and Microsoft in Canada, that they are hiring Canadian staff, that they are using the tools to enable and advance Canadian talent within those organizations. And it becomes part of defining what we mean by sovereignty and who we are best willing to partner with that's going to preserve our culture, our intellectual property, our data, and our talent.
The first round comes to an end, and we will now start our second round of 5 minutes and 2.5 minutes with MPD Reader. Please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone coming today. My question will be for you, Ms. Adam. We constantly hear about massive U.S. players such as CoreWeave, Microsoft, and Amazon receiving Canadian incentives or securing large blocks of Canadian power, while Canadian-owned providers compete for the same constrained grid. In your dealings with federal programs, are Canadian-owned data center operators getting equitable access to power, land, and investment incentives compared to foreign hyperscalers? Are we effectively subsidizing our future competitors?
Thank you for the question. I will say that, let me back up. The reality is that this hyperscale and large buyers that you mentioned are actually a critical part of our ecosystem, and you've heard it just a few seconds ago. They bring the scale and they bring global standards and innovation velocity. Are we being treated fairly by our government in terms of our allocation and grants? I think the government is now starting to understand the scale of the Canadian players as compared to the international ones. And I think that so far we have been treated fairly. We just need to, as an industry, and to educate. We find that there's more and more need to educate our government and government agencies as to what is possible and available in Canada, what type of digital infrastructure can be made available by Canadian players from data centers such as us, cloud providers that compete with international cloud providers, hardware providers, and so on and so forth. And to answer your questions, we do feel like we were treated fairly. It's just incumbent on us to create more visibility with our government because our international counterparts have done so for much longer.
So that being said, you say they're a critical part of our infrastructure. A lot of your customers are Canadian enterprises that they have to comply with PIP, EDA, PIPEDA, and other domestic laws. But our hyperscalers or foreign-owned facilities operate on Canadian soil, but they're subject to U.S. or other foreign jurisdiction laws like the U.S. Cloud Act. This is a real-world risk, creating protection to our health, financial, and government data. And what concrete mechanisms should our government put in place to ensure our data sovereignty is kept on Canadian soil and our Canadian data centers, so that there's no risk to our data when you say that these players are critical to our infrastructure?
Right. So what this means is we need to focus on our sovereign ambitions on access boundaries. Who holds the encryption keys? Who decides where the data flows? And who can turn things off if needed? It means that having Canadian-sided and power credible infrastructure that can support those workloads here on our own terms. So we need to focus on establishing access boundaries. And in practice, what that could look like would be a hybrid model where domestic platforms like ours work hand in hand with hyperscalers on their frameworks that embed Canadian governance, cryptographic controls, and also create some local value.
That there's a current comprehensive plan in place for AI sovereignty?
I don't believe that there's a full-fledged comprehensive plan. We are still trying to define it. We're still trying to define what sovereign means.
Well, there's $900 million in this budget for large-scale sovereign public AI infrastructure. And with that, there's no plan.
We have faith that our government, after the 30-day task, will come out with a clear path forward and framework that we can work with.
How much time do I have left?
45 seconds.
Okay, I'll just thank everybody for coming today. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will proceed to MP Rana for 5 minutes. Please go ahead, MP Rana.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both witnesses for being here with us on Monday morning. My question is to you, Dr. Gutu. In 2017, Canada became the first nation to introduce a countrywide strategy for artificial intelligence. The Pan-Canadian AI strategy allocated $125 million in funding for the years 2021 and 2022 through 2025 to 2026 to support the growth for Canada's of Canada's AI ecosystem. So, could you please tell the committee more about this AI ecosystem?
Thank you for your question. You know, as I noted, the Pan-Canadian AI strategy that you mentioned was what initiated these think tanks across Canada, which really has placed us as a leader at the front end, where research is the anchor to innovation. It initiated MILA, AMI, and the Vector Institute, as well as CFAR, which are some of the most world-renowned research and ideas that are coming out. What we also did, and if you think at the time that this AI strategy was developed, generative AI, agentic AI had not been publicized. It was very early days and it wasn't accessible. So at this point, the type of AI that we were talking about was closer to machine learning. It was very focused on data, and really we moved the dial in Canada in advancing generative AI and some of the technology we have now that is really showing some great value. So the initial strategy launched us forward. I think we're now at the opportunity with the refreshed strategy, which will be coming out very shortly, to be able now to take it and look at, okay, now that we're in a new world of AI with much more accessible tools, with clear areas for growth for Canada, as well as areas where we clearly need to define what our Canadian guardrails are for safe use. We're at a new point in being able to develop, and it's a very different time in the evolution of AI that the first strategy was enabled.
And which Canadian industries, especially health, agricultural, energy, are seeing the strongest AI adoption, and which the weakest one?
Yeah, I can only answer that from my own perspective and my own bias, Madam Chair. I believe that health, for example, has really shown some great advancements. And it's an industry that was quite comfortable in leveraging data for everything from epidemiology, clinical informatics, clinical decision support, expert systems, were all adopted in the late 70s and 80s. So it's an area where it's not new. And it was quite comfortable in leveraging data. It leans very heavily on research best practices, which have principles-based approach to how we protect data, how we ensure there's no bias, ensure transparency, and that was able to launch that forward. Not to say there's not excellent research happening in agriculture, in manufacturing, robotics, quantum energy, and quantum computing are all areas where there's a lot of advancements as well as the finance industry in looking at more precise predictions and models. So again, I'm speaking from my own knowledge. However, I do know that we have a very healthy ecosystem. Energy, oil, gas, critical minerals are all areas as well where we have invested and seen some great gains.
And being a civil engineer, I want to know how this AI will change this civil engineering department, especially in design. And can you please elaborate about this?
The best advantage of AI, if we look at it very practical, is the ability to do more with less, and the ability to bring data and information into the hands of decision makers quicker. And all industries are going to benefit from that. If we look at civil engineering or any engineering, the ability to be able to make decisions so we have less downtime, so predictive maintenance models, so we have less downtime of assets, having more precise resource allocations, more personalized services to the public are all advancements that will affect that industry as well as others. We're also at a time that cross-sector, cross-industry collaboration is critical. I'm already seeing that work that we've done for decades in healthcare are helping oil and gas and utilities. So the models need to be shared, and I believe that's something in Canada that as we advance forward, we'll be able to do that so that we have reusable, effective models that provide value and have been tested.
Thank you. And Ms. Adam, Canada's strong 2025 budget introduced new initiatives aimed at strengthening the country's AI capabilities. The budget will invest $925.6 million over next 5 years, beginning 2025-2026, to build a large-scale...
Ivana, your time is up. Maybe you can complete the question, and then if
Okay,
in case
thank
you don't get the opportunity to reply, you can send in the answer in writing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, the sovereign public AI infrastructure designed to expand domestic computing capacity for both public and private sector researchers. Given the budget, what kind of the government policies are the incentives would most accelerate the build out of AI-ready data centers in Canada?
Thank you. We will, if you don't get an opportunity to ask the question in the next round, please, if I would request the witnesses if they want to respond in writing. And we will now proceed to MP Blanchet-Juncker for 2.5 minutes.
Madame la Présidente, ma question pour Madame.
Thank you, Chair. My question for Madame Adam. We learned that about 80% of digital data in Canada, from Canada is stored in infrastructure controlled by the U.S. companies. The Cloud Act allows the American government to access the data, even if it's located in Montreal or Toronto. Do you think that this undermines Canada's sovereignty? And how can corporations in Canada, like Easter Church, offer alternatives to protect our data as well as our intellectual property?
Question. So you were asking if data hosted currently in large hyperscalers such as AWS compromises the sovereignty of our data. Given that the Cloud Act can subpoena the cloud provider to retrieve data that is within their cloud. Yes, the answer is yes. However, there are frameworks that can be put in place by our government to make sure that we have the key. When that subpoena comes through, we need to be able to decide whether we release the data or not. The decision has to sit on this side, on the Canadian side, right? So there's different ways in which you can do it. Obviously, as a data center provider, we host the infrastructure of our customers. We don't own this server infrastructure. It is our customer, be it a Canadian customer or an international customer, bringing their own servers and hosting them within our facilities. What we provide is the very basic ground level, meaning the sovereign facility built on Canadian soil, right? So this is the very basic of it.
Madame Adam,
yes.
Je dois poursuivre pour ma prochaine question.
My next question, Ms. Adam. Quebec has clean, stable, and predictable energy, which is needed for in AI facilities. We have one that was set up by TELUS in my riding. Do you think that we could take advantage, do the same thing in Canada as TELUS did? We could be a place where renewable energy is abundant like Quebec. Right
direction. AI models are power hungry, and they're becoming more and more power hungry as technology advances. We used to talk about, racks that consume 5 kilowatts as a high density rack. By the end of 2027, we're supposed to see server racks that consume up to 600 kilowatts. We need clean, renewable power to be able to power these intensive workloads, and there's no better power than renewable hydropower.
Time is up for MP Blanchet-Juncker.
Oui, juste demander à Madame
You
Adam
can please come in the second round.
Exact.
Yeah.
Juste lui demander, j'ai plus de temps moi après, juste lui demander par exemple
I just want to ask if she has any further information to add, she could send it to us in writing.
Now we will proceed to MP Ho for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first round of questions is for Ms. Adam. So earlier this year, the federal government announced their support for the AI industry through the AI Compute Fund. And of course, the very first check that the government wrote, they decided to write a $240 million grant to Cohere, a Canada-based AI company. Now, there's nothing wrong with supporting a Canada-headquartered business, but all of that $240 million of taxpayer money was given to CoreWeave, a U.S.-based company, to help build out their compute. Do you see an issue with that when there are Canadian data center operators who are ready for the challenge?
Thank you for the question. So I think he was asked a little bit differently a bit earlier. Do I see an issue with it? I think, like I mentioned before, that was the first iteration and the first grant that was provided. I think there's a lot to learn from that. I don't know how much visibility we had at that point as to what that looks like, the build out looks like between CoreWeave and Cohere. I don't know if we saw down the line where the funds are going, but is there a better alternative? Of course, there are many Canadian data center operators that can build the same or better level of digital infrastructure as a CoreWeave or any other global player would do. We just need to be informed, right?
Well, that's very troubling. And what's even more troubling is that we found out later that there were no strings attached to the $240 million that was effectively shipped out to a U.S. company. At a time when the government, the federal government, is going on with this buy Canadian rhetoric, it doesn't seem to be living up to its standards. So my second question is, NVIDIA, which is a large U.S. firm, has backed Cohere, a Canadian AI company, in more than one round of funding in its financing rounds, which ironically, as we talked about earlier, Cohere is a customer of CoreWeave, which is a US-based company. So CoreWeave, which is also backed by NVIDIA, buys chips from NVIDIA, and then Cohere, which is also backed by NVIDIA, purchases compute from CoreWeave, which is again backed by NVIDIA. So it seems like the money is just moving around if you follow the paper trail. And all the roads seem to lead back to NVIDIA, a US-based company. Do you see an issue with that, or is there a bubble that's brewing?
I don't think I am able to comment on that question, but I do think that these types of structured deals are very, very prevalent in the AI industry.
Okay, so
I cannot make a comment on your question regarding a bubble.
So my next set of questions for Ms. Goutu. So you're a member of the AI Strategy Task Force, and given that the government has announced over $1 billion in funding in the 2025 budget, and it hasn't even defined the term sovereignty adequately, are there any guardrails to that $1 billion to make sure that it doesn't go to multinational companies, like, end up being, money that's being shipped out to subsidiaries of NVIDIA and just moving it around between companies?
Thank you for your question. I believe that would probably be a question for the minister rather than for myself. However, I do know that there's recommendations, as we've discussed here today, on this is exactly why we need to define what we mean by sovereignty. And we need to define, if we're going to collaborate, what the benefit is to Canada. And that should be part of how we build out our ecosystem. In order to accelerate very quickly, there is a need to partner. There is no question that we need to collaborate, but we need to do it to our benefit. And as you say, we need to do it with guardrails.
So you do agree that there should be some guardrails then, if, as a member of the committee, that guardrails are important, and the Liberal government has to learn from its failures.
I can't comment on the past actions of the Liberal government, and as I say, that would be a question for the minister. However, I know that there have been conversations in part of the consultation of the task force in clearly defining what we mean by sovereignty, clearly protecting what needs to be protected, and making sure, as we define who we collaborate with, that we understand what the benefit is to Canada in doing that.
Thank you, that is all.
We will now proceed to MP Jessic for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Adams, I would like to understand a little bit more about eStructure Data Centers Incorporated, for whom you are the Senior Vice President, particularly your business model. I understand you're a Canadian-owned data center provider. You have facilities in many centers across Canada. You serve nearly 1,000 clients with a focus on enabling enterprise applications and supporting the digital economy. Could you describe in any way why people, why individuals, these clients come to you as opposed to going perhaps to a college that might have an applied research focus or a university? Are these people who have perhaps exhausted other options and they come to you?
So thank you for the question. Just let me clarify our business model. We are a co-location data center provider, which means we build facilities and we rent out space, power, and cooling, meaning the customers who already have their gear, their network appliances, their servers, they come and they install them in our data centers. We do not touch their infrastructure. We don't own it. We don't have the right to see what is on it. So generally, these customers are customers who, again, own their infrastructure and they're choosing between hosting it on site in their own premise or bringing it to a co-location data center such as us, where we can guarantee uptime and security 24/7, so they don't have to worry about losing power and then losing the data on their servers, or not having their IT manager in the office when something happens. We take care of all of it, making sure that we give these companies 100% uptime. So our customers would not generally be ones that would be tapping into resources from a research institute or university, because they will own their own compute and their workload would sit on their own gear.
So you don't in any way sort of vet these clients as to what their research focus is. You simply provide the premises. Is that correct?
Correct. We don't necessarily look, obviously we have a established know your customer process where we don't really allow everybody and anybody to enter our facilities. We need to understand their business. But at the same time, no, we don't look so far deep into the type of technology that they are working on or they're researching.
Thank you. Dr. Guttu, you've had an opportunity to express your opinion around sovereignty on a number of occasions. If you could give your best advice, what would sovereignty for AI look like from your perspective?
I thank you for your question. I think to answer it, what we need is clarity. The lack of definition or clarity on what we mean by sovereign is causing confusion, as we've seen here in the conversations today. And it's critical that we define it. In my mind, there are things that we must protect as Canadians: our culture, our data, our IP. If we're investing in research, how that comes into fruition and to become a marketable solution, that needs to be protected and retained as a Canadian IP. And the same goes for talent. There's a lot of very high salaries being offered outside of Canada. However, people want to stay in Canada for the culture. So we need to make sure that we set up an ecosystem that allows us to retain our talent, that allow people to stay in Canada and not be lured by larger salaries elsewhere, because we don't want to leave Canada. So in answering your question related to sovereignty, we need to very clearly define what it is we need to protect. And I think that's something that is, can probably be settled fairly easy. We need to decide if we are going to collaborate then for the things that we don't have, that we need assistance with, where we want to leverage the best outside of Canada to be able to advance ourselves. We need to set that up in a way that the framework is very clear, that we understand what the benefit is to ourselves and that there's a benefit for the partner investing in Canada. We've seen some fantastic investments that have grown Canadian talent within Canada with the assistance of industry from outside of Canada. And that's really where I believe believe we need to focus on, how can we attract people to do business in Canada? How can we attract our own talent to stay in Canada and to move into this high-tech industry? And then understanding how our jobs are going to look like in the future. Where do we have gaps and where can we attract those from elsewhere?
Thank you. Time is up. And with that, I want to thank both the witnesses for their important testimonies towards this new study we have started today. And if there were any questions you were not able to respond, you can please always send in written answers, and we will circulate it to the members so that we take into consideration while drafting the report. And thank you once again. And with that, this panel comes to an end, and we will suspend the meeting for a few minutes so that we can have the witnesses for the second panel join us. So thank you once again, and the meeting is suspended. order. I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of the new witnesses. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can make the selection for the appropriate channel, either floor, English, or French. A reminder that all comments should be addressed to the chair. And for this second panel, I would like to welcome our three witnesses. Today, we are joined by Professor Eric Kolasik, Professor Computational and Data Systems Institute, McGill University, and he has joined us by video conference. We are also joined by Mr. Francois Lebonti, Chief Executive Officer from Computer Research Institute of Montreal. He's here in person. And our third witness for today is Mr. Hugo Larochelle, Scientific Director representing Mila Quebec Artificial Intelligence Institute, and he's joined by video conference. I would like to welcome all the three witnesses. All of you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and then we will proceed to the round of questioning. We will start with Professor Eric Kolasik. Please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. My name is Eric Kolasik. I'm a professor of mathematics and statistics at McGill University, and I'm the founding director of McGill's Computational and Data Systems Institute, known as CDSI. I was previously the director of a similar institute in the U.S., and in building and maintaining these institutes, I have come to believe strongly in their important role in connecting, complementing, and amplifying the investments that universities and governments make in research and education around artificial intelligence. University-based institutes continue to foster and enable an agile ecosystem for Canadian AI by supporting cross-disciplinary research collaboration and a talent pipeline that today is very much in transition. Conventional academic structures have evolved often into disciplinary silos that often unintentionally inhibit interdisciplinary collaboration. Data-driven research, such as AI, has cross-cutting implications that ignore these artificial partitions. Institutes like CDSI address the challenge of communicating across disciplines by intentionally and strategically breaking down silos and bridging divides. Within the university, they create space for developing shared understandings for fundamental questions and applications while providing seed funding to actively develop solutions. Externally, they provide a clear point of contact for industry partners, government bodies, and community organizations seeking to engage academic expertise and the robust university talent pipeline. Canada's investments in university-based institutes are vital for their continuing to promote interdisciplinary collaboration within academic institutions and with external partners. There is a growing need for tools and training that support responsible engagement, necessitating that researchers and subject matter experts from outside conventional AI-related disciplines engage fruitfully with those within. Currently, Canada's ability to develop such socially responsible and context-aware solutions is limited. Institutes bridge this gap by providing training programs and facilitating partnerships that make data, computing, and systems accessible to students and researchers, regardless of discipline. Investing in such programs is essential for democratizing AI research and resources, which will then lead to equitable outcomes in AI adoption in the broader society. Additionally, translating fundamental research into real-world contexts is an ongoing challenge at the research policy interface. Decision-making requires clear, credible insights from academia to inform everyday questions around AI adoption. Yet, even when exceptional research occurs, it often remains confined within its academic boundaries. Institutes serve as translators between multiple sectors, by supporting university research alignment with national priorities and industry demands, all while helping policymakers identify and then navigate complex applications. Institutes establish and maintain channels for regular dialogue that reinforce knowledge exchange between Canada's AI expertise across sectors. And finally, Canadian researchers make important advancements that are dependent on increased visibility to provide broader impact. Across Canada, researchers produce exceptional work, but the limited infrastructure available to support knowledge translation and mobilization can impede its adoption into decision-making processes. Institutes amplify and champion the university's voice by representing Canadian scholarship on local, national, and global stages. They make sure that Canada's investments in AI are producing cutting-edge technology while contributing to thoughtful, inclusive dialogue about the role of AI in society. Sustained support for institutes is essential for ensuring that publicly funded research is informed by and contributes to public dialogue and policy development. Empowering institutes like CDSI that bridge disciplines, lower barriers to access, and amplify research results for greater impact is fundamental to Canada's position at the cutting edge of AI. It is imperative that Canada's robust AI research community remains a trusted partner to maintain the country's position as a global leader in responsible and open artificial intelligence. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And we will now proceed to Mr. Lebonte. Please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is François Labonte. I'm here today on behalf of the Computer Research Institute, Montreal, CRIM. Let me start by presenting innovation and artificial intelligence. I'll start with the recent report by the Council of Canadian Academics of November 18, 2025, which notes the steady deterioration of Canada's innovation performance to the point where maintaining our quality of life is being questioned. Rapid and accelerated adoption of AI by our businesses is identified as a promising lead for addressing the situation. Innovation here means the conversion of scientific and technological advances into socioeconomic value. Innovation is not synonymous with novelty. Innovation represents the culmination of a rigorous and systematic industrialization process, which validates the performance, reliability, and viability of a potential new product or process in real-life context. This aspect of industrialization is poorly understood in Canada, and its crucial importance is underestimated. Industrialization is a profession in itself, requiring distinct approaches, skills, and resources. CRIM is a not-for-profit organization that has